Innovation, creativity. You hear these words all the time, right? Every organization is chasing them. But what do they actually mean? And, more importantly, how do you get them to happen? Well, today, we're going to cut through the noise and break it all down into a framework that actually makes sense.
Okay, so let's get into it. And just so you know where all this is coming from, our guide for this whole explainer is a major state of the science review from the Journal of Management. What the authors did was pull together over a decade of research to give us the clearest, most evidence-based picture of what really makes creativity and innovation tick inside an organization.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics, just making sure we're all on the same page with the definitions. Then, we'll zoom in on the individual. From there, we'll pull back to look at the team, and then zoom out even further to see the whole organization. And we'll wrap things up by busting a huge myth that gets in the way of real innovation.
First up, let's get our definitions straight. And this is so important because, let's be honest, people use these words almost interchangeably. But the research shows there's a really important difference between the two.
I really like this all-in-one definition the paper gives us. Instead of treating creativity and innovation like two separate things, it frames them as two parts of one single process. It's the whole journey, from trying to develop new ideas to actually introducing them. It's about the entire arc, from that first spark to the final product.
And that process really splits into two clear stages. Creativity, that's the idea generation part. It's the spark, the new concept. But, an idea sitting in a notebook doesn't really change anything. That's where innovation comes in. Innovation is all about idea implementation. It's the tough, practical work of turning that creative spark into something real in the world.
Okay, so keeping that difference in mind, let's start at the very first level, the individual person. Where does that creative idea, that initial spark, even come from?
So this is the big question, isn't it? What makes one person seem more creative than another? Is it just something they're born with? A creative personality? Well, the research tells us the story's a whole lot more interesting than that.
Turns out there's no single magic bullet. Individual creativity is more like a complex recipe. Sure, personality traits like being open to new things, they definitely matter. But they don't operate in a bubble. They interact with the kind of job you have. Your motivation is also huge. Are you driven to learn for the sake of learning or just to hit a performance target? Even things like your thinking style, how much you believe in your own ability to be creative, and even your mood on any given day, all of it plays a part.
And this leads to such a powerful idea, captured perfectly in this quote. Creativity is not just for a special, chosen few. The evidence is clear. With the right environment, with the right support, managers can actually help unlock the creative potential in just about anyone on their team.
So, if managers can bring out creativity in individuals, the next logical question is, what happens when you get a bunch of them in a room together? People almost never innovate all by themselves. So let's zoom out to the team level and see how groups actually innovate together.
And again, we've got a really practical question to dig into here. When you're trying to build an innovative team, what do you focus on? Is it all about the official structure, or maybe getting a diverse mix of people? Or is there something else, something more powerful going on?
Well, a massive meta-analysis gives us a surprisingly clear answer. Things like team structure, or even how diverse the team is, have a pretty weak connection to innovation. But look at team climate. The shared feeling, the vibe, the psychological environment of the team, it has a hugely positive correlation. What the team feels like matters way more than what it looks like on an org chart.
So what exactly makes up this powerful team climate? Well, the research points to 4 key ingredients. First, a clear vision that everyone buys into. Second, what's called participatory safety. Basically, people feeling safe enough to throw out wild ideas without getting shot down. Third, a real focus on the task, a shared commitment to doing great work. And finally, actual support for innovation, meaning management puts its money where its mouth is. Get those 4 things right, and you're creating the space for big ideas to happen.
All right, let's pull the camera back one last time. We've looked at the individual and the team. Now let's look at the entire organization. How do you build a whole ecosystem where new ideas can be born, grow, and actually see the light of day?
At this big picture level, a different set of things comes into play. We're talking about the systems and the culture of the whole company. Things like HR practices that actually reward new thinking. We're talking about how knowledge flows through the company, whether the structure is decentralized enough to let people take action, and of course, having the resources and a supportive culture to back it all up.
But let's hang on that one point for a second. Resources. For years, the common wisdom has been that having Slack,
Extra time, extra money, extra people is a huge plus for innovation. It just makes sense, right? More resources should equal more new ideas.
Well, here's the twist. At least one study found something really counterintuitive. In organizations that were already struggling, managers who had more Slack resources actually spent less on research and development. It's not so simple. And that brings us to our final and maybe most important section.
That finding is the perfect setup to debunk a huge myth that still dominates the way we think about innovation. It forces us to seriously question this idea that more is always the answer.
The paper gives this myth a brilliant name: the innovation maximization fallacy. It's this quiet, unspoken assumption that any and all creativity is good, and so the goal should just be to get as much of it as possible all the time.
So why is that a fallacy? Because endless, uncontrolled innovation can actually be chaotic. It can cause instability. It can pull your attention and your resources away from the core, routine things that your organization has to do just to survive. You can't be so busy chasing the next big thing that you forget to do the thing that keeps the lights on.
And this really points to a new way forward. For both researchers and managers, the goal should be to integrate how we think about coming up with ideas and putting them into practice. We have to constantly question that more is better mindset, and we even need to be willing to study the potential dark side of innovation, the times when it might actually do more harm than good.
And that really brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this whole deep dive. Effective innovation isn't about just cranking the dial to the max. It's about balance. It's about integrating the new with the necessary. And at the end of the day, it's about skillfully managing what is, at its heart, a deeply complex and human process.